there, Warriors. Welcome back to another episode of the Warrior Way podcast. I, of course, am your host, Coach Cowan, and today we're on episode 23. And I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about habits and addictions. Now, I did ask you guys some questions about what you consider to be a habit and what you consider to be addiction. And I asked that on social media on a couple of platforms, and I got some pretty consistent results and replies from everybody. So it seems like the general consensus is that a habit is something such as brushing your teeth or waking up a certain time of day, or maybe smoking, right? But when people talk about addictions, they seem to go straight to alcoholism and drugs and really serious things. Now, the reason I asked these questions and the reason I wanted to discuss addiction and habit at the same time is I want to propose a thought to you. What if they were the same thing? What if fundamentally habits and addictions are relatively the same thing? I mean, not all addictions could be considered habit because there are two different kinds, but all habits are essentially addictions. So I'm going to step back there. So when you're talking about addictions, you essentially have two main classifications. So you have like a physical substance addiction, and this is where you talk about alcoholism and drug abuse and narcotics and just people who are hooked up on pain pills and they just can't get off of it. But we also have behavioral addiction. Now, these are typically classified as habits. Now, where the problem comes in of simply calling things habits is we tend to have less of a power behind the word habit. We tend to consider it less important, less severe, less serious. And that poses a lot of problems. Because when someone has an addiction, it's very clear you need help. You go get help. Hopefully you go get help. But at least those around you understand you need help and it's recognized. And when you're seeking help, you are usually encouraged because you're like, yes, you have a drinking problem. Yes, you need to go to 12-step programs. You need to stop drinking. And there's a typical society acceptance and support for that. However, when we're talking about habits, we don't get that same sort of feeling. Habits are almost as if they're not as critical. They're not as crucial. They're not as big. Which is complete nonsense. It's complete bullshit because a bad habit can actually destroy your life just as easily as an addiction can. I mean, it's easy to see how alcoholism or drug abuse could destroy your life, but people don't realize how easy it is for a habit, something as simple as negative self-talk can destroy your life. Something as simple as constantly living in a world of limiting beliefs where you truly do not feel that you are worthy or capable. That can completely destroy your life and you don't even realize it. So my proposal here is that we need to start treating our habits a little bit more like addictions, where we need to acknowledge that there's a problem, right? A habit's not just something we do. It's a problem. Like, I'm going to read you guys the dictionary definition, slightly paraphrased for addiction first here. So an addiction is a compulsive, chronic, physiological or psychological need for a substance, behavior, or activity that often leads to harm, right? And then when we come off of that substance, when we are in withdrawal, we've experienced things like anxiety, irritability, you can even tremors and nausea and anything like that, right? There's a whole list of stuff. Now, a habit is listed as a settled tendency or usual manner of behavior, pattern acquired by frequent repetition or physiological exposure that has become nearly or completely involuntary. Now, I don't know about you, but the two of those have a lot of crossover points, a lot of similarities, right? In both cases, it has to do with being exposed or repetition to something. You know, whether it's a substance or whether it's a behavior, whether it's a thought, it's continual exposure and repetition to it. And it becomes, in both cases, either nearly or completely involuntary, where you partake in that action, you partake in that behavior, that thought, that physical use of something almost involuntary, because you have developed this system in your mind to tell you to do this over and over again. And when you're not doing it, it can create a whole lot of problems. So to talk about habits, I'm going to specifically stay away from any that involve any kind of substance. So I'm going to stay away from even smoking. When we're talking about habits, let's say you have a habit of sleeping in. You have a habit of hitting that snooze button 6 or 7 times. And I think most of us, including myself, 100%, definitely back in high school, my parents can certainly agree with this one. I definitely had the habit of hitting the snooze button multiple times. I had a hard time waking up when I was a teen. Still have a hard time waking up, but now I've made a decision that I have to. So it's a lot easier for me now. But if we looked at that habit of sleeping in, of hitting that snooze button, now that might not sound that big of a deal, might not seem that important, especially when we were talking about alcoholism and everything before, but it can destroy something as simple as that can destroy your life the same way. You know, it can ruin your sleep quality. It can make you more irritable in the morning. It can make you skip breakfast, which can then have a lot of physical issues. It can create a lot of extra stress. So you're starting your morning off with a dose of cortisol through your system, which is just not good for anyone. And when we go to break that habit, when we go to make ourselves wake up early, to make ourselves jump up at the sound of that, first alarm that goes off, we actually can experience a lot of the same things you experience when you go through withdrawal of a substance. We'll start experiencing anxiety, certainly irritability, right? You certainly will be very angry at your alarm clock. And it could create things like tremors because your body's not used to this new pattern. It can create nausea because of the anxiety and the cortisol rush that your body, again, you're going to produce extra cortisol when you first start trying to break this habit because your body's freaking out, right? You're used to having cortisol in the morning because you're already always late. But now you have that instant, your brain's like, okay, I'm awake. Let's get this, anxiety kick. But you also have this, you're changing things. So that brings on a lot of stress. So to round it all up, if the behavior, if the habit is acquired in a similar manner as an addiction, if it is brought on in the same kind of way that an addiction we brought on through repetitive exposure, and then if the pain of dealing with it, the pain of changing it, has a similar physiological and psychological response as coming off of a substance, of going through withdrawal, I think it's pretty safe to say that as far as our brains are concerned, as far as our bodies, our psychological and physiological perceptions are concerned, habits should maybe be treated more like addictions. We should maybe approach them from the same kind of power, the same kind of angle, where they're taken serious, where they're not just something that we can, kind of shrug off, right? I mean, you go to quit smoking, everyone calls about habits, or like kick the habit of smoking. But when it actually comes time to do it, everyone talks about the addiction of smoking, how addictive they are. Very few people actually break down the habit of it, where it's not just the chemical, it's also the habit of smoking. It's also this behavior pattern that you've acquired through constant and frequent repetition. And when people do approach it more from that point of view, and they approach it less from the chemical side and more from the psychological side, people have much better success quitting. I know when I quit smoking many years ago, I was up to about 2 packs a day on my worst days there, and I was smoking a lot, and I had smoked for many years. And when I quit smoking, I had tried the gum, I had tried the patch, I had tried everything that was available at the time, and it didn't work. Obviously, I continued smoking. It wasn't until I made a psychological decision to quit, and I started looking at what psychological triggers I was having to cause me to quit. Now, this is years before I even thought about going into coaching or personal development. This was just, my regular curious mind that wanted to know why I couldn't quit, right? Because I always considered myself someone of power. So why couldn't I quit? Why didn't I have power over this? And when I realized the certain triggers that I had that created the behavior of lighting up a cigarette, which then gave me the reward of the nicotine and chemical hit, along with everything else that's in those sticks, but it also brought me the pain because I was like, I quit smoking again, which then continued my problem, which led back to a trigger, right? And when we get stuck in these loops, so something triggers us. We have a trigger, and then that could be anything from like a bad day, somebody cuts us off, we get in a fight. We then default into this behavior, which in my case was lighting up a cigarette. I was always like, oh, takes away the stress, takes away the edge, and then I'd get a temporary reward, right? A temporary reward. And that would always lead to pain though, because I was doing the behavior I didn't want to do. So even after the reward wore down, there was then that pain, that afterthought, which then just continued my problem on, continued things being worse. It kept me smoking, which then triggered my anxiety and got me to light up another cigarette. And the cycle continued. Now we go through the same loop here, the same habit loop, the same actions for everything, not just smoking, not just substance, but we do it with negative thought. We'll have a trigger where we see a job opening for a promotion or some new career we really want to do. And then we end up in this behavior of limiting beliefs where we're not good enough. Maybe I won't get hired for that job. I don't have the right qualifications. I don't have enough experience. Why would they hire me, right? And momentarily, there is a little bit of reward and pain. You get a little reward of it feels good to give up on stuff initially, right? So you get the little reward of, okay, now I don't have to do this. That anxiety's gone. I have the stress gone from having to put myself out there for this new position. But then there's also the pain, because now you're still stuck where you were before, which is obviously not where you want to be, or why would you even be looking at the job boards and the promotion boards, right? So that continues your problem of being unhappy, being unfulfilled, and being undervalued and appreciated because you did not allow yourself to go for that job that you definitely were worth. And that just continues it up again. So the next time a job posted on the board, you go through the same cycle. You go through the same, this would be really awesome. Oh, but I'm not good enough, so I can't do this. So you quit. You give up. And it's only when we break this, it's only when we learn to break the connection between the triggers and the behaviors, to not allow these triggers to essentially autopilot us to these behaviors, that we can move past it, right? And that's absolutely where you can see habits are almost identical to addictions, because we subconsciously and involuntarily jump from trigger to behavior. And another great example for this to help you get the concept I'm trying to put out here would be people who want to eat healthy. Okay, so you have this plan, no more sugar, no more sweets, and something happens, right? You have some issue. Again, it usually starts with some problem, some interaction you've had with another person, which goes into this behavior, this thought pattern of I'm not good enough. And you reach, almost involuntarily, you reach for a donut or a cookie or some kind of, high fat, high sugar, low nutrient, huge reward. And you eat it and your brain gets this kick of dopamine and it's just so happy, it's got this reward. But then afterwards, you just feel empty. Like you filled yourself up with donuts, but you feel empty inside because you've let yourself down. You have failed to stick to the healthy eating that you promised yourself you were going to do, which then just continues the problem and makes it worse, because now the next time you're thinking, okay, I need to eat healthy, that little voice in your head is even stronger now. So when that first trigger hits, that voice is even stronger to drag you towards that behavior. That little voice in your head that says, why are you going to eat healthy? You're just going to grab that donut anyways. May as well enjoy it. And we end up in these vicious cycles. And we can try as hard as we want with all kinds of diet plans and meal plans and exercise regimens. And we can join every gym and every weight loss club there is. We can follow all of the nutritional gurus on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. But it's not going to matter. Because as long as we have this mental habit, this addiction to talk down to ourselves and to prevent ourselves from becoming successful, we are always going to be stuck in this habit loop where we're going to reach for the donuts. Now, when we're talking about the more serious addictions, the alcohol, for example, it's a very common one. So it's an easy one to talk about. There's programs like the 12-step program that you can go to where there's meetings and there's a group. You can go to a meeting, you can talk to people, and you get support. You get sponsors, you get someone to check in on you and see how you're doing. And if you're having a hard time and you're thinking about having a drink, you can call someone. Why don't we have programs like that for negative self-talk? Why don't we have programs like that for just generalized anxiety, not clinical anxiety, not actual mood disorders, but general anxiety, just the stuff that every single person feels? Why don't we have that? Why don't we have 12-step programs and groups to be able to call and sponsors to be able to call when we're trying to lose weight and we're about to dive into our third slice of pizza because we just had a rough morning and we just didn't feel like making a lunch today, so we grabbed something while we were out. Why don't we have that? Now, maybe that's something I should put together. Maybe I should make a 12-step program for that. Maybe I should put together a a meeting for this kind of stuff. Self-talk anonymous. All right, maybe I will. Maybe that'll be my next book or my next program, right? But I think as long as we continue to put habits aside as if they are the small, easy thing for us to get rid of and they're not really that big of a deal, we're going to be continually stuck in it. And more importantly, as long as we continue to write off our regular day-to-day behavior, our regular day-to-day attitudes and thoughts and actions as nothing other than this is who we are and this is how we are, we run the risk of never identifying them as habits or as addictions, right? To talk about the chemical addiction, you can get addicted by every sense of the word to negativity. I've mentioned it many times before that whether you're thinking negative or positive, and whether you're in a happy place or a sad place or a stress place, your body releases all kinds of different chemicals, different kinds of endorphins. If you get excited or scared or in a moment where you need to go, your body's going to produce adrenaline, right? It's going to get your heart pumping and get things going. And you can be addicted to adrenaline. That's where the expression adrenaline junkie comes from. People who need to jump out of an airplane once a week just to feel alive. It's because essentially they've become an addict to that chemical in their brain. And that chemical in their brain has been given to them from the habits of constantly jumping out of a freaking airplane, right? Now, on the flip side, we also have people who are addicted to negative emotions, negative thoughts, the people who love negative gossip. They love hearing trash about other people. They love talking trash about other people. They love talking trash about themselves and just feeling like garbage because it releases all of these chemicals. I mean, the big one I always come back to is cortisol because I don't think a lot of people understand the impact it has on your system, right? Cortisol is the stress hormone. It has good benefits. There is some positive stuff. It kicks in during the fight or flight response to kind of give you an extra boost of blood pressure and energy just to kind of go. But when you're not in that kind of situation, when you're just in a regular situation where you don't need to have the immediate physiological response, you don't need to get up and go, you don't need that extra power to move, all it does is put undue stress on your system. And it just makes you feel like garbage because you have this energy that all of a sudden kicks in and you don't expend it. So it just sits there. And everything, all your blood pressure increases, your heart rate increases, your hair stands on end, everything happens, your muscles tense and get ready for a fight. And when it doesn't have anywhere to go, all the lactic acid in your muscles just stay there and ends up manifesting in, you hear people who carry stress in their shoulders and in their neck and in their back. And that's from the lactic acid just sits there and it just builds up. And I'm someone who knows this more than a lot of people. I've had chronic back issues for forever, as long as I can remember. And a huge part of my stress I do carry in my mid back, underneath my shoulder blades. And I have constant back problems because of this. Even though I know that stress causes this, even though that I know that I need to avoid my cortisol intake, I need to expel it when I'm feeling stressed. I need to physically move and let it out. I'm still human myself, right? So it's still something I'm learning. It's still a journey I'm on to deal with that, right? Which is why I share it with you, because I try to share whatever my journey is in hopes that it'll help you on your journey, because there's going to be a lot of parallels, right? My story's not that unique, right? Some of the details might be, but overall, my story's not that unique. It's not that much different than yours. So where am I going with all this? Where am I going with this? I've been talking for about 20 minutes now on habits and addiction. And where I'm going with all this is I just want you to be a little bit more aware of your day-to-day tendencies, your day-to-day behaviors and routines. Start paying attention to what you do each day. When you wake up, what's the first thing you do? Do you have a drink of water? Do you check your phone? Do you use the washroom? What is the very first thing you do when you open your eyes? What do you do next? What do you do after that? What is your regular routine? When you are dealing with a typical low stress but confrontational situation, it could be anything from merging on a busy highway on your commute to work. It could be dealing with a coworker who's not the most friendly or makes constant rude or degrading jokes. It can be anything. What is your typical response? What is the thing you do first? And when you're doing that response, it's not just about the action. What are the feelings and the emotions you have attached to it? Where in your body, as weird as it might sound, where in your body do you feel that stress, right? It could be something weird that you feel tingling in your toes when someone starts getting you irritated. Start paying attention to all of these actions as you do throughout the day, and the positive ones too. When you find yourself laughing, pay attention to what caused that, right? When you are doing anything that you don't want to be doing, subconsciously, you're like, okay, I don't want to do this. You're like, okay, I don't want to eat like crap. I don't want to smoke. I don't want to, lash out and be angry at people. When you do grab that extra slice of pizza, or you do light up that cigarette, or you do lash out on somebody who just made a mistake in your coffee order or maybe doesn't deserve your anger, start figuring out what might have triggered that. Start feeling out how you felt when you did it, and try to figure out exactly what it is, because it's not going to be the fact that they screwed up your coffee that really made you angry. There's going to be some other trigger, and the behavior that it's going to trigger is simply lashing out, right? If you think of it as a computer program, when this happens, do this, right? So when you're on Netflix and you click play, it plays that content. Much the same way, when you click your trigger, it plays your behavior, and your behavior in this case is lashing out at the first person in front of you. So what is it that actually is creating that anger? Because I guarantee you, it's not that the barista forgot to put milk in your coffee. Nobody should actually, if you're getting angry, if you are truly getting angry about that, then there is something deep rooted going on that you need to get some serious help and work on. Chances are, for most people, it's going to be something smaller and something that's completely unrelated to the coffee itself that has caused you to be irritated enough to lash out and cause that trigger to kick in for you to enter into that behavior loop. And momentarily you feel good because you release adrenaline and cortisol and all of these tasty brain chemicals when you lash out. But then afterwards you get back to your car and you just feel like a piece of shit because you just yelled at somebody who's, chances are making minimum wage and does not deserve to put up with your nonsense because they forgot to put milk in your coffee, right? There's bigger issues going on in the world right now than that. So start tracking your day. And do it over a period. Do it over a course of like a week or two, and look for patterns. Figure out why you are doing what you're doing every day, and look for things that you do every single day, and try to figure out why, and figure out whether they serve you or not. So to go back to first thing in the morning, if you wake up first thing in the morning and the very first thing you do is check your smartphone, does that serve you? Does it really matter what's happening on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or in your email first thing in the morning when you first wake up? I mean, I'm not judging. I do it too. And in your particular case, depending on what you do for work or what your lifestyle is, it might matter. It might be extremely crucial what happens first thing in the morning on your social. But for most people, pretty much everybody, the 99.999% of people who will be listening to this, it does not matter. I guarantee you it does not matter in that first minute. And there's obviously a lot of problems with checking your phone first thing in the morning. I'm not going to get into that. That's not for this episode. But it's just an example of one little tiny habit, one little tiny addiction that you might be participating in on a daily basis that is actually distracting from your life. It's taking away. It's not adding anything. And when you switch it up, you might have a little bit of anxiety because you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on now. You might be a little irritable because you're doing change, and change is hard. But it's worth it. In the end, it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, you will have started your day off without all of this extra stimulus. Your brain will be able to wake up properly. And you'll just feel better. So go through your day and look for all these little things you do, all these little things you do on autopilot, and figure out what's actually important and what actually is helping you. And start figuring out what habits you have. What are all these little habits that you don't even realize you have? And they can be anything from things you do, things you say, things you think, things you choose to eat, decisions you make. We all have them. And not all of them are bad. Some of our habits are really good. If you brush your teeth before you head out in the morning and you brush your teeth again before you go to bed, that's a good habit. I mean, that's going to, not only is going to save you a whole lot of money in dental care, but it's going to help with your overall general health, right? So there are good habits and there are bad habits. And the truth is they're all kind of on a spectrum, right? Because you can overbrush your teeth to the point where you actually damage your enamel. And some of our negative habits about, questioning ourselves and our beliefs can also keep us in check and keep us in balance and prevent us from overestimating our current abilities. And it also can help us build up goals of where we want to be, right? So maybe if we question whether or not you're capable of lifting something, that's actually good because it might get you to stop so you don't hurt yourself. But it also can set a goal for, I want to be able to lift that weight. So go through your life, go through your day-to-day, keep a journal. As I always say, I always recommend a journal. Keep a journal and start marking down some of these things you do. And start figuring out maybe why you do them, what emotions you have attached to them. If it's a strong emotion, where in your body do you feel that emotion when it's happening? And does it add to your life or does it take away from your life? All right, that's pretty much all I got for you guys today on this episode. I do want to quickly mention that my book, Go Love Yourself, is available on Amazon worldwide. I've been getting a lot of great feedback from it. I even hit #1 spot on 2 different categories on Amazon, which was pretty cool. That means a lot of people have made the decision to start fixing their relationship with themselves, because that's a lot of downloads and a lot of purchases to get to that point, which is pretty exciting. So if you have not already grabbed yourself a copy, go grab yourself a copy of Go Love Yourself on Amazon. The links to it are all over this podcast, and they're in my bio on every social media platform you can think of. And if you do go to coachcowan.ca, you'll come up to my Beacons page, which has links for everything. And right at the top of it is your link to get your copy of Go Love Yourself. If you order the paperback, it is available on Prime. So if you do have Amazon Prime, you can get it you order it today, you could have it tomorrow. I mean, that fast, right? It's pretty awesome, the power of technology today. And obviously, if you order the digital version, you get it right away, instantly. And if you order both, first of all, thank you. And secondly, that'd be great, because then you can dive into the ebook and start getting the stories and some of the messages I have. But then you get the physical book, you can actually do the worksheets, which is pretty cool. And I think I'm actually going to be putting out a companion book to go with it that actually is just going to be full of worksheets, because some of these are ones to revisit over and over again. They're not one-time worksheets. And well, thanks for joining me again today, guys, on the Warrior Way podcast. Very excited to have you guys check out my book. Thank you again for listening. And if you know anyone who this would find value in this podcast, please share it with them. And make sure you subscribe to me on every platform that you listen to podcasting on, whether this is Spotify or iTunes or Google Podcasts, or iHeartRadio, or whether you're just watching this on YouTube. Please be sure to subscribe and follow along and share this with every single person you know who might find value in anything I have to say. If you have any suggestions for upcoming topics, please send them to me. You can reach out to me on social media at the Coach Cowan. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. If there's a platform I should be on and I'm not on there, reach out to me and tell me, and I'll come over and say hi. So if you have any suggestions, send them to me. If you have any feedback, send it to me. Or I'm also looking for guests. So if you are someone who either works in the personal development space, either as an author or a speaker or a fellow coach or a therapist, or if you have some kind of story to share, some kind of inspirational story that you think would add value to the listeners of this show, please reach out to me, because I am currently starting to book for guests on this show, and I would love to hear your story, and I would love to share your knowledge with all of my listeners. And other than that, I'm going to leave you guys the same way I always leave you. If you see someone without a smile, give them one of yours. Cheers, warriors.